Welcome to Stop the Fight. And today we are recapping this weekend's action with JoJo Diaz and Gilberto Ramirez. Let's go!
Don't brag about taking my side piece! Don't brag about taking my side piece, though!
I broke my back. Back is broken. Spinal.
He's strong man, good boy, just...
All right, let's talk the JoJo Diaz Javier Fortuna fight. So I think it went about as I planned. Now, I did pick Fortuna to win, and I thought the fight was really close, but I did think that Diaz edged it. So if you guys followed my lead there, we did not win that fight. But I think some of the flaws that we identified with Diaz were evident in this fight. He is a fighter who, at the lower weight classes, uses his aggression, his size, and his ferocity to get the better of his opponents, break them down, wear them out, and stop them. He was unable to do this with Javier Fortuna. Now, why? Well, Javier Fortuna is a better fighter than I think some would give him credit for. So there was absolutely that. Fortuna was able to hit Diaz numerous times throughout the fight, really caused Diaz a little bit of an issue, especially towards the latter half. I think he was down on my card maybe 3-1 after 4, something like that, and then kind of brought it close, I think within a round or so, towards the end. Now, Diaz, he got cut in this fight again, in the same area as the Tevin Farmer fight. Now, you guys have to understand that cuts on a fighter are a bad thing, especially numerous cuts in the same area fight after fight. What winds up happening here is the skin in that area becomes weaker and weaker and weaker, is more prone to getting cut. And it's in a bad area, so it's going to start dripping into the eye. Diaz, JoJo Diaz is, he's vulnerable in this area now. He has to be careful when he fights. Now, of course, you don't have a choice. Fighters are going to use their head. They're going to use every option in the playbook to try and weaken Diaz. Diaz, though, did a great job. He did lack power, like we said. Not so much that he lacked it, but he wasn't able to... He's not a power puncher. That's what I mean. Is that he does not have the power to put a guy out. He has enough for you to be respected by it, of course. This isn't like Stevenson, where I feel, not even Stevenson, Colbert, where I feel it's really kind of maybe not even enough to get your respect at the higher weight classes. But over here, JoJo Diaz has a little bit more than that. So there were points where it looked like he, especially in the first round or the second round, one of them, I think the first round, it looked like he may actually get Javier Fortuna out of there. He did not, of course. The fight went to a decision, and Diaz won, I think, a little bit wider than I like. Like, I really thought it was a 115, 112 type of fight because there was a point deduction. So that's kind of how we have it here. Does Diaz have a chance at this weight class? Unfortunately, I do not. Unfortunately, I do not. And again, as I'll keep saying this every time I have a podcast, every time there's a show, because this is just one of those truths that needs to be acknowledged consistently. Everyone needs to get it through their heads. 135 is the hardest division in boxing. Who here would take Diaz over Lomachenko? Crickets. Teofimo. Crickets. Gervonta Davis. Crickets. They're calling out Ryan Garcia, and I think over there, Diaz may have a shot, but only because Ryan Garcia is green. I think in terms of ability, unfortunately for Diaz, Ryan Garcia seems to have a higher ceiling. But, the Ryan Garcia was caught in the Campbell fight. So he has shown to be at least vulnerable to getting hit with big shots. The question is, does Diaz have the power to do something that Campbell did? I don't know, and I don't think so. Not at this weight class. At 130, probably. Not at 135. So, what do we... where does he go from here? Well, I think the talk of Ryan Garcia would be nice. If he's going to win that fight with Ryan Garcia, it has to happen next. Why? I mean, I don't want to, obviously this sounds opportunistic, and it is. Diaz should push every advantage that he has. This is a boxing, this is prize fighting. You got to win to secure a future for you and your family. Win almost by any means necessary, regardless of the circumstances. Ryan Garcia recently went through some mental stuff. He came from a tough fight with Campbell. Now's the time you got to get him. If he still has any lingering issues mentally, boxing is a very mental sport. Then now is the time to get Ryan Garcia. You don't want him building more confidence, and you don't want him to become stronger mentally. Because becoming stronger mentally is becoming stronger physically, at least in boxing. We've proven this time and time again. Character here really matters. Really matters. So his chance at Ryan Garcia is now. This fight needs to happen in the fall, in the winter probably. Not going to happen in the fall, but probably in the winter or late fall. So again, congratulations to JoJo Diaz. He proved me wrong, or at least let's say he partially proved me wrong by winning this fight. I think we were vindicated in the analysis, is that this is a fighter who is ferocious indeed, has good offense indeed, but is lacking a little bit of power and is not quite at the class of the top guys at 135. I think that was proven. Where does Fortuna go from here? Fortuna, like I said, is a better fighter than indicated. I think he is a perfect, just outside the top 10 or right in that bottom half of the top 10 type of guy at 135, but probably right outside. Now that JoJo Diaz is in this class, like imagine this for a second. Let's just name the top 5. You're going to have Haney, Lomachenko, Teofimo, Davis, Garcia, Campbell, right? Somewhere over there is probably Fortuna. And then you're probably going to get, Fortuna Diaz, and then you're probably going to get like a Fortuna down there. So, and, that's just the reality. That's how stacked this weight class is. Again, no disrespect to any of the guys. So I think Fortuna is a guy that's going to be right outside the top 10 and is a great gatekeeper to fighters who want to try and break into that top 10 at 135. He is a good counterpuncher, better than I expected. He obviously has lapses. He can be bullied, but, he's a perfect guy to gatekeep at the top 10. And remember, guys, a gatekeeper is not a derogatory term. I know a lot of times people say, oh, gatekeeper, calling him a bum. No, guys. There are leagues in boxing like there are in anything else. There are fighters at the world championship level, fighters just below it, and fighters just below those. And Fortuna happens to be right over there. Everyone occupies an ecosystem, a niche in the ecosystem in boxing. If everyone was a world champion and everyone was great, well, it wouldn't happen. Eventually, people would separate again further on. No matter how good the top gets, it'll filter back down. If there were, let's say, 100 Gervonta Davises or guys in Gervonta Davis's class, eventually only a few of those would be champions and the other guys would be contenders and gatekeepers and so on. Being a gatekeeper doesn't mean you're a bad fighter. It just means you just, unfortunately, do not have enough to become a world champion. But you can still be a very good fighter, or at least a good fighter in my eyes. So that's where I feel Fortuna is, especially at this weight class. It's going to be an outside the top 10 guy who gatekeeps the top 10. Now, what else did happen this weekend? Now, this one I was really wrong on. It happens sometimes. Barrera was decimated by Gilberto Ramirez. Decimated. Ramirez looked good at 175. I really think that Jesse Hart fight may have been him just being a little too drained. He looked big. He was only half an inch bigger than Barrera. He looked more so. And obviously, this is Barrera also kind of fighting low, but he blasted him out of there, man. Those body shots, especially that first one really said the deal. He was throwing a combination, was Gilberto Ramirez, right? And I think he was doing like a left, right, and then he kind of turned over as Barrera started to answer and just turned a mean left hook, like right under the ribcage of Barrera. That one shot, I think that ended the fight right there. Everything else was just textbook, like, academic closing. So what wound up happening is Barrera goes down, clearly alters his cardio, his conditioning, everything else. He survives into the next round, goes down 2 more times to body shots. But it was over. A shot like that landing to the body, I mean, you got to give Barrera props just for getting up. But Ramirez was quite beastly. And I know he called out Canelo, but he is probably too big, too young, and too strong for Canelo. That is not a knock on Canelo. That is just the truth of the matter. A good big guy will beat a good little guy. And I'll be frank, I underestimated Ramirez a little bit. I thought he looked cruder at the lower weight class than he looked against Barrera. He looked compact and tight against Barrera. He really did, even in the 4 rounds. Now, of course, you can say Barrera was quite passive, so it allowed Ramirez to be compact. Remember, guys, everyone can look amazing against a heavy bag. And that's a little bit of what Barrera was. Barrera just never got started, really. And you may argue that, well, we don't really know what Ramirez is going to look like at 175 because Barrera never got going. You may be partly right, but do you really want to err on that side now with the way he got Barrera out of there? Remember, Barrera made it all the way through with Joe Smith. You know, yes, he was stopped by Bivol, but only at the very end. So this was a relatively durable guy. Also made it all the way through with Andre Ward. Relatively durable guy. And, you know, here was Ramirez, you know, completely destroying his body in a few rounds, 4 rounds. So where does, like I said, I don't know, Ramirez, Canelo, they're just one weight class too far apart. I believe even at 168, Canelo is pushing the boundaries of where he's going to go due to the fact that he's 5'8". Ramirez looks so big. Like, now he's not going to go to cruiserweight because that jump from light heavy to cruiser is 25 pounds. But, you know, he's a big boy. Let's just put it that way. Ramirez is a big boy. There's no need for Canelo to fight him. At least I don't think so. If Canelo does, it'll be a very brave act, you know, and it'll be something. I will, of course, watch the fight, but I would be worried a little bit for Canelo there. He may have bitten off more than he can chew. Speaking of light heavyweight, the Beterbiev fight against Joe Smith Jr., it looks like it's close to getting finalized. That's a fight. That's a fight, right? Wow. I mean, I've spoken about this before, like maybe a month and a half ago, maybe 2 months ago. Beterbiev versus Joe Smith. Now, that is... Oof. I don't even know. Off the top of my head, if you had to put a gun to my head, I'm taking Joe Smith. Again, I like Joe Smith. I told you there's some fighters I like, and I'm just going to root for them. I'm going to be biased. I have some reason. Now, Beterbiev has been down before. He's kind of fought lackluster opposition recently, outside of the Voisic fight, but that was already 2.5 years ago or so. Joe Smith Jr. has been fighting contenders. Like I said, he's a little bit like Wilder. They just get better every time because they're so crude starting out. So the Joe Smith that lost to Bivol, but landed a few good shots, I mean, he's a different animal than the one that fights now. You know, and you saw him against Vlasov, who was significantly better than advertised, and he was kind of able to weather the storm and get through Vlasov. So against Beterbiev, early on, I don't know who's favored, who's underdog. I'm assuming Beterbiev is going to be the favorite there, the fact that he's undefeated. But I am going with Joe Smith Jr. I am going with Joe Smith Jr. in that one. I mean, we'll talk about it some more. We'll give a full kind of analysis on it. But that's just like, I'm really happy that fight is getting done. And I'm telling you guys, we are in a very good time for boxing. It seems like after 2016 or so, 2015, there's been nothing but good stuff for boxing. We got the Canelo-Golovkin fights. We got the Kovalev-Ward fights. You know, it's just the heavyweight picture is different. It's no offense to Klitschko, but that fight with Klitschko against Joshua, you know, the Povetkin fight. I mean, the rise and maybe fall, but re-rise of Lomachenko, the Davises, the Teofimos. We are in like a very good spot in boxing right now, I feel. It was a little bit of a lull in between, I think, that Super 6, which ended in like 2010, 2011, and like 2000, right at the end of 2015. There wasn't like Pacquiao had already been knocked out, and Mayweather was clearly at that point kind of, you know, done. Everyone wanted that Mayweather fight in 2009 with Pacquiao. We never got it. By the time we got it, it was like, you know, Pacquiao's already been knocked out. So you really did have a lull right after that Super 6, I feel, a little bit. Had a lot of aging European guys around the light heavies. Super middleweight was the division, but you know, it was kind of over at that point. Kessler was more or less down from the super middleweight. So you kind of have a little bit of a lull, and now we're kind of like back at it as everything revved back up, and I think we are in full gear. If it wouldn't be for COVID, we're in a little bit of a golden age in boxing. At least I believe so. Obviously, with Crawford and other greats, but we're not going to talk about that right now. So, you know, what else is on the horizon? What else is on the horizon? Apparently, Malignaggi is going to be on the card. Well, on the Lamar Odom card. I mean, I don't know. I don't know how I feel about that. I feel bad with the whole thing with Malignaggi and Showtime. Like, you get Malignaggi because he speaks the way that he speaks. He speaks truthfully. He speaks loose. He didn't say anything that offensive. You know, all he said was that the Eastern Europeans are starting to dominate, and the African-American domination of the sport is in a relative decline, and that's partially true. In the lower weight classes, the Mexicans have ascended. And in the middle weight classes, it's been Eastern Europeans, right? You had the Golovkins. You had the Kovalevs. At cruiserweights, Usyk. At heavyweight, you have like the triumvirate over there with Wilder being, like, yes, there are great African-American fighters right now, without question. I don't think anyone's questioning Crawford or Spence, Gervonta Davis, of course. But if you look at it in the totality of the sport, then he's partly right. The last few like monsters, boogeymen of the sport were Kovalev and Golovkin. The rising stars, the phenoms, have been Lomachenko and Usyk. The last reigning world champion that was undisputed, heavyweight world champion, was Klitschko. Knockout monsters in Povetkin. Like, it really is the case that the Eastern Europeans are quite overrepresented. Now, of course, he was crude in the way that he explained to himself because of the way that he talks, but that's what he meant. So, I like Malignaggi. I hope someone picks him up. His analysis is really on point. I love listening to him talk boxing. I think he really, really understands. There was recently an interview with him, and he talked about why Buddy McGirt was just not the right trainer for him. And it's very informative. You guys should go find out and listen to it. Yeah. Tim Tszyu wound up completely, blowing out the replacement. I forgot who the replacement even was. Tim Tszyu is following his father's footsteps, and I don't think he's his father's son in the sense where, like, the talent level is not as evident, at least early on. And, I don't think he is at his father's level, but nonetheless, he is, pretty good, actually. I think he's above the Australian level, so now he's got to go to the world level. We're going to see what Tszyu can do. Let's talk about a couple of other fights. Obviously, Casimero versus Rigondeaux is a really important fight. Now, of course, I don't know if you guys know, but Donaire withdrew from the fight over some personal things that were said about his wife. You can... Look, I get it. He wants to be a clean guy, Donaire. He wants to be a respectful guy. But at the end of the day, this is boxing. Have you heard the kind of shit that, McGregor was saying in UFC this weekend? This is the sport where Mike Tyson was talking about eating people's children or whatever. Guys, people always say they want to die in the ring. Like, I understand what Donaire was saying, but this is a fighting sport. Pulling out because bad words are said, it seems a little bit facetious. It seems like holier than thou. Donaire, go in there and fight. I get it. You were insulted and you want to stamp, root out sexism and blah blah blah. Go do that in a political science class. This is a little bit different. Even though the intention was noble, I agree with you, but this is a different arena. It's not quite meant for that. Now, of course, we can say that social change and sports go hand in hand. Without question, they do. But come on. Maybe I don't want to really speculate, but there's some rumors that he didn't want to risk the fight against anyway with Casimero. If he loses to Casimero, he doesn't get the anyway fight. That's a huge legacy fight for him. It's a huge money fight for him. So who knows? But Casimero's not going to fight Rigondeaux. And why is this actually a little bit better? Well, Rigondeaux schooled Donaire, to be quite frankly. And we don't even know how old he is. How old is Rigondeaux? I don't know, 40, 50, 36? I'm like, the rumors about Cubans and their age are quite legendary. No one knows what age any of these fighters are. And this is funny, but kind of true. So that's going on that front. I don't know who I would pick in that fight right now. I would never pick against Rigondeaux. The only time I ever did pick against Rigondeaux was with the Lomachenko fight, simply because, like I said, too small. The size is important. But other than that, I just tell you off the top of my head, I'm just not picking against Rigondeaux, even as old as he is. Although he's gotten into like a firefight in his last few times out, and that's never good for a defensive genius like Rigondeaux. All right, so now again, this is gonna do it for me. We're gonna talk about the Charlo Castellano fight this weekend. It's a pretty important fight. It's a really big test for Charlo, and we're gonna see what's up. It's over.
I'ma go home and break my wife's hip.
Don't brag about taking my side piece. Don't brag about taking my side piece.
I broke my back. Back is broken. Spinal.
He's strong, man. Good boy. Just.